Hi, everybody. Because LACA is now a cog, we're no longer under Robert's Rules of Order. So we no longer, for this particular meeting, and because they did restructure it to an advisory capacity and not a standing committee instead of an actual committee that had to be minutes and roll call the same as what the governing board is. So we no longer have to do that. So I was checking in everyone that I saw as they logged in and kind of taking roll call that way. The minutes, I believe they were emailed out, but if not, there's a link here in the PowerPoint of the minutes of the June 4th meeting. A few housekeeping items. Typically at this particular meeting, we would be sending out sign-off sheets or passing around sign-off sheets for everyone to sign that would allow us to place your employee W-2s on the kiosk for your office staff to be able to look at. And then for classic districts, for us to submit your W-2s and 1099s to SSA, IRS, Ohio, RETA, CCA, and then to various cities. Because we're not in person, we will be emailing those sign-off sheets to you within the next week or so and ask that you sign them and return them back to us. There is a separate form if you want your W-2s in Bear, and once authorized, every year I will continue to put those W-2s out in Bear until you tell us, no, we no longer want those out in Bear. And I misspoke on the first one. The first one is to place the employee copies on the kiosk, and the employees can get their own copies on the kiosk. Some hot topics. We've mentioned this to the payroll staff a couple of times. The Ohio minimum wage increased from $8.70 to $8.80 effective January 1, and the federal minimum wage is $7.75. Here's a link to some posters that are available on that. Ohio has a new IT4 for new hires and employees wanting to make changes to their Ohio tax withholdings on or after December 7th, which is actually this coming Monday. And here is a link to that new IT4 form. We have talked several times about the Families First Coronavirus Response Act and the various types of leave that can be taken through the FFCRA. There's a type that you can take for yourself up to 10 days, a type that you can take for family members and child care for up to 10 days at 2/3 of your salary, and then an additional 10 weeks for long-term care that can be taken for up to 2/3 of your salary. Those three types of coronavirus leave need to be reported on the employee's W-2 in box 14. So hopefully your district has been keeping track of all of the employees that have taken these various types of leave and how much. And what you do report is the dollar amount that the employee was paid against each of these three types of leave. There are new fields on the 001 federal tax record In redesign and classic, the classic fields have not been updated yet. When I get the next release of state software, which I expect in the next week or so, those fields will be available. And here are some links that take you to the detailed explanations of what these leaves are and what the W-2 impacts are on these types of leaves. The Coronavirus Relief Fund final expenditures are due January 31st of 2020. This is Fund 510 with a CFDA of 21.019. The expenses, this is for expenses that are or were necessary and incurred due to COVID-19 public health emergency, not accounted for in the budget most recently approved as of March 27th of 2020, and incurred between March 1 and December 30 of 2020. And these funds have to be spent. My understanding is that they can be encumbered. The goods had to have been received or the services rendered prior to December, even though the check may not have been paid or expended out of the fund until January, but they had to be everything done prior to December 30 of 2020. HB 404 extends the virtual board meetings through July 1 of 2021. There was also a provision that changed some of the restrictions on the teacher and administrator evaluation provisions through the 2020-2021 school year, and also gave some flexibility with assessments in not penalizing districts if certain students were not able to take the KRA or the fall third grade ELA. Curie will be talking more about this later, but I do have a few slides that talk about changes to the 1099s. They have split out the 1099 miss form. Years ago, I guess the non-employee compensation was reported on a separate form, and then they combined it, and this was like early 80s, into the 1099 miss. Why a new form? The non-employee compensation must be filed with the IRS by January 31st. The other 1099 reportable payments must be filed by to the IRS by February 28th or March 31st if filed electronically. Because they want the non-employee compensation filed by January 31st, they split that out into a separate form. And however, both forms must be furnished to the recipient by January 31st. The payments reported on the 1099 miss are at least $600 in rents, prizes and awards, other income payments, medical and health care payments, payments to an attorney for gross proceeds, at least $10 in royalties or broker payments, payments from which federal tax income was withheld under backup withholding rules, deceased employee wages paid after death in the year the employee died, additional payments per IRS 1099 miss instructions. Payments reported on the 1099 NEC include at least $600 in services performed by someone who is not your employee, including parts and materials, payments to an attorney for fees for services, professional service fees to accountants, architects, contractors, engineers, etc., payments from which federal income tax was withheld under backup withholdings, additional payments per the IRS 1099 miss instructions. Report payments to all types of payees unless you know an exception applies, and see the IRS 1099 instructions for those exceptions. Exceptions include payments to tax-exempt organizations and government entities and some organizations that are incorporated. The IRS requires the payee's legal name. For sole proprietor, it is the individual's name as appears on their 1040, or the name shown on Form SS4 when they applied for an EIN. So if you have a business that is a sole proprietor, but they do business under another name, they want the sole proprietor's name, not the doing business as name. Also, the address needs to be the legal address per their tax return. The IRS matches names and tax identification number combination on information return with a master file. They issue a B notice for invalid name 10 combination. The frequent cause for a mismatch is the doing business as name is used instead of the sole proprietor. The name is misspelled or abbreviated. There's a missing 10. The 10 is not 9 digits, or it contains alphas or hyphens, or paper reporting IRS scanning errors. We have some documents on our website that talk about the Form 1099 miss and the 1099 NEC. And then we also have a document about deceased employee final payments. And then there are some links here for the instructions for the 1099. Are there any questions about the 1099 before I go on? And why the changes? Okay, EMIS update. As of Monday afternoon, all of my districts have submitted their initial 5-year forecast on time by the end of day November 30 deadline. That initial submission has closed, and the ongoing collection just opened today and will be open until the mandatory resubmission in April. If there are changes that occur between now and the mandatory resubmission in April that you desire to submit another 5-year forecast, that window is available for you. The first student collection will close December 21st. This collection is where the federal child count is pulled from for all IEPs that are in effect as of October 31st. It is also the collection that the casino revenue will be distributed based upon information of all students as of Friday of the first full week in October. The initial staff collection is open right now for submission, and all of your districts are working on it. All of the information relevant to the local report card for staff is taken from this first staff course collection, with the exception of the attendance percentage. There are a couple of leeways this year as far as certification checks, and the first has to do with a person who has a professional certificate or license that has at least 3 years experience can be considered certified to teach 1 grade higher or lower than what their license is for, and can teach subjects outside of what their license says that they are certified to teach in. So say you have a employee with a middle childhood certification, which is grades 4 to 9 in math and social studies. They can teach grades 3 to 10 in any subject and be considered certified. They have also extended the provisions of employees whose certification expired the end of June or the beginning of July, and they were not able to get their license, their coursework done to get their license renewed by then. Initially, they had extended that renewal until December 31st. I believe it was last week, the bill was passed that extended that they have until July 31st or July 1st to get their coursework done, to get their certificate renewed. If they do not have their certificate renewed by that time, then they will have to do an additional 3 hours of coursework in order to get their certificate renewed if it is an expired certificate. There are also College Credit Plus and tuition reports in the data collector under the reports level 2 of the student collection, the S collection. Those should be reviewed. The tuition reports will balance back to what is on your foundation payments, payment reports, and the College Credit Plus will show what is being deducted and sent to college for your students that are participating in College Credit Plus. Any questions about the EMIS update? Okay, current fiscal projects. We do not have any new issues in RAM. And as districts migrate to the redesign, we have transitioned them from looking at the classic to the redesign on RAM, and everything appears to be going well. The employee kiosk, we don't have any new updates. The timesheet module is still out there if any district would like to test it. We had agreed upon a year ago that the PDF pay slips that would display in kiosk and the W-2s that would display in kiosk would be 3 years of W-2s, and the pay slips would be the current year plus the prior calendar year. And as of July 1st, we did make that change. So that is what is displaying in the kiosk for districts that are on Classic. As districts migrate to the redesign, we have carried over that amount of information, and then it will continue to build from there. Power School eFinance Plus, Granville and Heath went live in round 8, and they, along with Licking Heights, are receiving their eFinance Plus support contracted from TCCSA. We did not have any LACA districts that chose to go eFinance for round 9. For the redesign, the last update we gave this group was the March statistics of 129 districts live on redesign, with 114 in wave 5 for 235 total districts participating. As of October, there are 283 districts live, with 146 participating in wave 6 for 368 total districts participating. LACA had 3 districts in wave 6. North Fork is live. Mount Vernon went live this week. And Northridge is in the middle of parallel right now. Wave 7, we had a pre-kickoff meeting with our Wave 7 districts because we had to have a questionnaire to the MCOECN tomorrow. We also gave them the documentation on classic cleanup steps. And we're going to have a kickoff meeting on January 26th to finalize everything with them on what to expect and how the parallel will go and how everything will transition. We're planning on training on February 16th, 17th, and 18th. And then we have 2 districts that are going to parallel in March and 2 that are going to parallel in April. We recommend a full month of accounting and 2 payrolls before officially going live. In addition to the districts listed on this screen, we have Licking Valley that will be getting us data sometime in February, March, April, so that we can start imports and testing their data, and then with an anticipation of go live July 1. So they are kind of in between wave 7 and wave 8. But we welcome Licking Valley to LACA's support on the fiscal side. The redesign update, SSDT has fixed the 1099 and W-2 submission options so that districts can submit their own data to the IRS and SSA. Previously, last year, we had to get the file from the district and then transfer it up to the VMS and then append it to everyone else's, and so that we could submit it. And excuse me, they have since added the information that is necessary so that districts can submit their own files for the 1099s and the W-2s. The accounts receivable module for districts to be able to create their own invoices to send to entities was placed in production August 3rd. The ESC was one of the test districts, and they have been, they were previously using ARF, and so Cheryl did give quite a bit of input into the design and testing, and they are actively using the accounts receivable module. The equipment inventory module is scheduled for a beta release in June of 2021. with production in August of 21. The workflow is scheduled for beta of August 2021 with a production release of September 21. The initial workflows that they're working on is requisitions, budget transfers, and employee onboarding. We do not know the details of what the employee onboarding will entail at this time. Some of the highlight of what is planned to be released in 2021 includes in USAS posting invoices and POs from a CSV file. This is very helpful for those districts that use purchasing cards and get CSV formatted files from their credit card vendor. Also, the appropriation resolution recap report. This would be similar to in Classic where you could put in your board resolution information, I believe. Financial assistance improvements. For reporting the financial assistance for EMIS reporting, there was no way in redesign to pre-populate that with your current funds and amounts. And so they're working on pre-populating that federal assistance screen. Some account filters improvements and account receivable improvements to allow you to email invoices to vendors. On the USPS side, in Classic, when you voided a check, there was a batch file that you posted to AutoPost that would take care of doing the reduction of expenditure. They are going to recreate that on redesign so that when you post a void, you don't have to go into USAS and manually create that receipt to do the reduction of expenditure. It will create the pending transaction that will go over to USAS, and then you can post your pending transaction and it will take care of the reduction of expenditure. Also, more flexibility when posting from attendance gives you the option to be able, as you're posting attendance and it posts the pay portion to either payroll future or payroll current, it will give you the ability to combine lines of pay, change the descriptions, change the type of pay from, say, a reg to a miscellaneous, add a pay account. Some direct deposit notice improvements. Once they make the improvements to their default form, then those items will be available that we can add them to any customized forms that we have. And then some improvements on mass load and mass change. And then improvements on reports. Are there any questions about anything that I have talked about? And any open discussion? We have decided to change our meeting around a little bit this year, and we're going to go through all of the meeting portion, and then we will do the calendar year-end accounting closing checklists toward the end of the meeting.
Mary, this is Britt.
Yes.
I have a question. On the W-2s, we're going to be uploading and sending. Are you still printing the W-2s for us?
Yes, that is an excellent question. Yes, I will be able to retrieve your print files, and LACA will still be printing all of the W-2s for all of our state software districts.
Great, thanks.
W-2s and 1099s. And we do have both types of forms. We have the forms for the 1099 MIS and the 1099 NEC. The upcoming meetings we do have a calendar year end virtual open lab scheduled for December 10th. That is on our event calendar. If anyone would like to sign up to have some assistance in answering questions about their calendar year end closing, we will be available, but we do request that you sign up. We have a redesign live district status call scheduled for January 21st for all of our districts that are live on redesign at that time. The next fiscal advisory meeting is scheduled for March 18th. And then our fiscal year end advisory meeting is scheduled for June 3rd. And the treasurer's retreat is still up in the air. It kind of got tabled for 2020. Julie, do you have any ideas or information about a future treasurer's retreat? And feel free to unmute yourself to ask questions. Okay. Capital assets. We did not go through the, we did not have the closing workshop for capital assets this year like we have had in the past. We talked about it at fiscal year end, but since reporting of capital asset information is no longer required as part of the period H collection, it's not that we forgot about it, but we didn't make as much of an emphasis on capital assets. So we want to remind the districts that are using equipment inventory to follow the equipment inventory fiscal year end handout. And then if you are a district on redesign that uses equipment inventory, there is an option to extract from redesign and import into the EIS pending, so that if you currently post from the pending file to get all of your purchase order information attached to the inventory item, then all of that information then will still be able to be populated when you add your inventory items. Then when you close, when we close, we will have a copy of the EIS DEP and the EIS CLS that we recommend that you keep for your records, because the auditors will probably ask for these. Excuse me. Run an EIS 103 for the new fiscal year and verify the ending balance for FY20 equals the beginning balance for FY21. Clean out your pending file and delete any items that will not be added to inventory. Here are links to the calendar year-end checklist for both classic and redesign. And Carrie?
Yep, I can share my screen and pick up from here if
Okay.
you are ready.
I'll stop sharing and I'm ready for you.
So in addition to having the links in the PowerPoint, we also have the checklists available on the website. Is everybody seeing the LACA website on their screen right now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and you guys are all probably familiar with searching for stuff on the website, but for anybody who is not, if you go to services and then select fiscal services, There's a lot of links here for different manuals, additional resources, and LACA created documentation. So if you go to the LACA accounting documentation page, there's a lot of documentation here available for your use and reference. So the calendar year and closing checklists for both Classic and the redesign are available here, along with any supporting documentation that is referenced within the checklist. Or like Mary referred to, the deceased employee documents and the 1099 document in the earlier part of the meeting today. So those are available there for you. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the Classic checklist and the redesign checklist side by side. And I just scrolled past those first two little summary checklist pages. I guess I need to do that on the classic side. And we will walk through your closing steps looking at your checklists.
Carrie, can you hang on a second? Okay, now they just cleared up. I was going to say, to me, what I was seeing was very blurry, and I was going to ask if everyone else was seeing something that was very blurry, but they just now cleared up.
Okay, so these accounting checklists were updated very recently on the website this week. I forget if we had them out there yesterday or exactly when we had these out there. So if you downloaded these earlier, just make sure that you have a revised date of December 2020 on your checklist so that you're not looking at a checklist from last year. I also think I included this in your email, so hopefully you guys all have the correct one. Okay, so instead of walking through a PowerPoint and giving you a highlight of your closing steps, we're just going to walk through the checklist today, side by side, Classic with redesign, and walk you through the process. And hopefully that'll give you one less thing that you have to keep track of as you're actually going through this process when you're back at your desk. So, the steps that we have them numbered the same. So they're kind of corresponding, Classic to redesign. So if you're familiar with Classic and it's your first time on redesign, this will maybe kind of help translate that. We do have a couple placeholder steps though that, may say this is no longer used in redesign, even though it was required in Classic. But to get started, what you can do now to get ready for calendar year end, you can review your 1099 reporting requirements. And Mary discussed a little bit of the change that's happening with this 2020 reporting year, how they're splitting certain aspects out to the 1099 miscellaneous and other aspects out to the 1099 NEC. And as long as you have the correct information put into USAS, Classic or redesign, if you've selected the correct payment type, then the information will end up on the correct form. So just go in and review your vendors and make sure you have everything. Go in and review the 1099 reporting requirements so you know you have a good feel for what you're needing to get put in the system as we go through these next steps. So the first thing you can do is validate that you have the correct TIN type on your 1099 vendors. And this has been a step for a few years now. So you're probably very familiar with it, and you probably have the correct TIN type on your existing vendors. This is probably just something that you have to worry about on any new vendors that were added to your system this year. And in Classic, this TIN type is entered in the SSN/EIN field in Reflections. It is not a field that is available in USAS Web, so it is likely that your users may not have went into Reflections and added this. So it is definitely a good thing to check and make sure that that has been populated on your vendors. So in Classic, again, you can update it in USAS Screen, Vend Screen, in Reflections. In Redesign, you can update that field in Core Vendors. And how you're going to review that field to make sure it's populated and it's accurate. In Classic, you have a couple reports you can run. You can run the tin match program, which actually creates an extract file that would allow you to upload it to the IRS tin matching program. And the IRS would then send you a result file back telling you whether the information you submitted is an SSN or an EIN. So you're definitely able to use this file and upload it and go that route, or you can just run this report to alert you to any vendors who are missing that field. Then you can go look it up and enter it yourself. You can also use your F1099 report, and embedded within that report, you may see error messages on your screen saying that you have a missing or invalid tin type. So that's two ways in Classic that you can review the information. In redesign, you can review the information in your core vendors grid with the filters that we have listed in your checklist. You can use the More button to add the additional columns to the grid first, and then use these filters. You can review it right there in the grid, or you can click the Report button if you would like to review it on a PDF or in Excel, or even if you just want to keep a copy of that report for your reference for later. But if you find anything that's incorrect, go ahead and edit the vendor and make that correction. Just a note here in the checklist, there is currently no extract equivalent in redesign for the tin match program. So if your district typically used the tin match program, just reach out to us and we can work with you to see if we can help recreate that file. It's just not a program that's in there by default from SSDT. So once you have that tin type on every vendor, you want to go ahead and verify that the vendors that are showing up on your 1099 report are the vendors who deserve 1099s and no one's missing. So you can do that in Classic using the Ven SSN option. And that report gives you several different options. We suggest you run option 4, option 6, and option 5. So option 4 and 5 can be used to review vendors who currently meet the requirement to receive a 1099 or may reach that limit by the end of the calendar year. And then you can review that list, make sure their vendor names are accurate, their addresses, make sure the correct vendors are listed there, the year-to-date amounts are correct. You can then run option 5 to look at your non-1099 vendors who you have paid $600 or more in the year, and review that list to see if there are any vendors who should be receiving a 1099. Do you maybe have a vendor marked incorrectly? Because you don't want to miss one. So if you see anything that needs corrected, you can edit those vendor records in USS Web or in Reflections Ven Screen to correct that. On the redesign side, you can use that same grid filter that you used in the previous step. So if you ran that to a report, you have that data right in front of you, and you can review their tax ID and make sure that's correct, review their information. You can also run an additional query. So you can search for any vendor that has been paid the $600 or more, but is not marked to receive a 1099. So just like in Classic where we ran that last option to see if possibly a vendor is marked wrong, this is going to serve that same purpose. So you can review that information directly in your grid after entering these filters that are listed in the checklist, or you can use that report button at the top right of your grid to send that to a PDF or Excel. And then you can go in and edit any of those vendors to change their 1099 type if it's incorrect, or if you see an incorrect tax ID or vendor name or anything like that. Anything that you reviewed in that list, you can go ahead and edit that directly in the vendor record. You also, as I kind of mentioned before, you want to verify vendor names. Mary mentioned earlier in the meeting that the IRS wants to see their official business name, not their doing business as name. They want to see their actual tax filing name. So make sure the name is correct, make sure their address is correct, and the amount is correct for 1099 reporting. So on the classic side, the then SSN report that you generated in the previous step, this is an example of what it looks like. So you can just scroll down each of these columns and verify that information. If you're missing a tax ID, then that SSN is going to be displayed as all zeros. So you know you have to go in and input that. Review that year-to-date total column to make sure, is there an amount that you maybe paid for outside of the system, maybe through an athletic checkbook or some other method that is not reflected in this amount that you need to go edit. Just review all of that name, address, information, year-to-date amounts, everything. And if anything is incorrect, you want to go edit that on the vendor. On the redesign, a similar report that can be used is the SSDT 1099 vendor report that is in your report manager. And when you run that report, it's going to be a list of all of your vendors by default, but you can go ahead and use your query options to limit it to just certain types of vendors. If you would like to limit that, you can run it multiple times for just certain 1099 types or for multiple 1099 types, just to limit your report a little bit. And then you can review the resulting information. The vendor name and address that you're going to see on the report, and that is going to be picked up on the 1099 is based on the location that is check marked for the 1099. So if you scroll down to the bottom of that vendor screen in redesign and you see those vendor locations, look at which one has the checkbox under the 1099 column, and that's the one that you would be editing if you have something appearing incorrectly on the report. There's also a comment there to ask you to please be extra careful when reviewing vendors and addresses for accuracy, especially if this is your first year on redesign, because during the import, which we're going to talk about on the classic side here in a second, but during the import, if you had any vendors with the 1099 : prefix in the second name field, that should have successfully imported into a vendor location checkmarked 1099, but we just want to make sure it did and there wasn't some sort of hiccup that actually is going to end up printing somebody's name with 1099 : in front of it. So keep your eyes peeled as you're reviewing that information, please, especially if it's your first year on the redesign. So back over here to classic. If you had a vendor who has a legal name and then they're doing business as a different name, there's two different ways you can enter that in the system. You can enter their legal name on the first line and then they're doing business as name on the second line, which I guess that's the second screenshot down here below. Or you can enter their doing business as name in the name field and then do the 1099 : that I kind of just talked about on the second name field. And if you have the 1099 : in the second name field, the system is going to go ahead and know that's its trigger to pick up that name and put that name on the 1099 instead of the name that you have in the name field. Or if you did it the other way with the DBA name on the second name line, then I believe actually both would appear on the 1099, but you would be meeting your 1099 requirement by having the legal name on there in addition to the DBA name. The only thing to remember if you are setting your vendors up like that is that it might be a little bit more difficult for your secretaries to find those vendors unless they remember to use their wildcard when searching for those vendor names. So in the redesign, if you have a DBA vendor name, that is controlled with your locations. Those locations at the bottom of the vendor screen. So which one is check marked 1099? That's how you control that instead of having to use 1099:. And then I also mentioned that you're reviewing year-to-date amounts on these reports and on your vendors. And if anything needs to be changed in Classic, you can edit that directly on the vendor screen, either in Reflections or in USAS Web, and enter the correct amount. In Redesign, you can go view your vendor record, and then you will see a button on that vendor called Vendor Adjustments, and you will click that button and enter a positive or a negative amount to increase or decrease the total as needed. So on the Classic side, you're just correcting the total to be the total that needs to appear on the 1099, and on the Redesign, you're entering the difference in order to get there to total the amount that needs to appear on the 1099. So one other reminder is just, it's a good time of year to make sure that you have a W-9 on file for all of your vendors. So if you are tracking that in the system, either in Classic or in Redesign, you can query that information and decide if you're missing any and go ahead and send requests out for that information at this point in time. So those are your pre-closing steps. Any questions so far? Okay, so next, when you get to the end of December, you're going to make sure that you have all of your December transactions entered in both Classic and Redesign, and you are going to reconcile with the bank. There are links that we've provided there to the manuals in case you're having any difficulty with that will walk you through a reconciliation procedure, or you can always call us as well and we can help you try to resolve that. And you also can enter your cash reconciliation information into the system. In Classic, that is going to be in the USA EMS EDT program, and in Redesign, that's going to be on the periodic menu, the option called cash reconciliation. Then you can run some reports to make sure you are in balance. So you in Classic can run the PO detail for outstanding POs and run your bow check. You are going to make sure all of those numbers listed on your bow check for cash, budget, and appropriation are identical for each line. Or if you're looking at the revenue amounts, make sure the cash and revenue accounts are identical for each line listed on that report. And then you can also verify the outstanding encumbered amount appearing on that report is the same as that is showing on that PO detail that you just ran right above that. If anything is not in balance, we recommend you run Fix ENC. So in Reflections on a menu prompt, you would just type FIX ENC. It will go recalculate your encumbrances. You can run the reports again and hopefully be in balance. And if not, contact us and we will help you look at that. In Classic, you will also run your FinSum, selecting the option to create the FinDebt at the same time and verify that the fund balances are identical on each report. In Redesign, the recommended reports are the cash summary and the financial detail report. So you can run the financial detail report for the month of December to compare the month-to-date totals to your cash summary report, and they should be identical. And if so, you are good to move on. There's a lot more numbers in Classic that are stored numbers, whereas redesign is recalculating numbers every time it runs reports. So there are actually more instances, more chances of discrepancies in Classic than there is in redesign. So that's why there's a couple extra steps there on the Classic side of things, but on the redesign side, like you have a PO detail too. You can go ahead if you would like. You can run your purchase order detail and look at your encumbrances as well. It's just not a required step in redesign like it was in Classic. So the next step is to look at your spending plan summary if you use that. So this is an optional step in both Classic and redesign. So in Classic, it's the SM2 calc that you can run and then review that information. And in redesign, it's the SSTT spending plan summary report in the report manager. Step 10 is to run any additional reports that your district desires. So you may have a list on your own, make sure you're following your own district specific checklist, or you may have worked with LACA at some point in time to set up in Classic the month end command procedure. So if you use that for reports for your board, for example, then you want to make sure you go ahead and edit monthend.com, correct the dates in there, and run the MoEnd program so that those are sent out to Bear and verify that those are in Bear. Again, this is an optional step though. So if you've worked with LACA to do that, just go ahead and do that step. And then so on step 10 in the redesign, run any additional district desired reports that you would like to have for your board. And actually, we can work with you if you are running the same reports at the end of every month and you would like to run those in a bundle. We can actually work with you to set up a bundle so that when you close every month, there's additional reports in your file archive if you need additional for your board members or for reference for look back later. So if you're interested in that, if you were one who used the monthend.com program in Classic and you feel like there's an additional report or a couple of reports that you would like in redesign every month when you close, let us know and we can work with you to set that up. So it's more of an automated process. So after you've verified your reports, you've ran and kept all of the reports that you need. In Classic, you're going to run a backup. And when you run the BackBud program to do that, it also sends some standard reports out to Bear. So we ask that you log into Bear and make sure those are there. And in redesign, your standard set of reports are going to automatically generate when you close the posting period of December in a later step. So at this point in Classic, as long as your backup completes and you have your Bear reports, you're going to run adjust for the month of December to zero out all of those month-to-date figures, calendar year-to-date, fiscal year-to-date figures. And if you get any warning messages as you're running adjust, please pay attention to those. If you have any questions about those, let us know. It could be reminding you that you had a future purchase order entered when you were in November with a December date, and you should hurry up and post that before you close. So please pay attention to those warnings if you see them, and call us if you see any that you don't think you should be seeing, and we can help you clean those up. But you're only running adjust for the month end option, not the calendar year end option at this point. And in redesign, we are not going to close the month yet, because in Classic, we close the month and then we keep working on calendar year end and then we close the calendar year end. In redesign, it's just one step. When you close December, you close everything. You close the month and the calendar year. So that step 12 is just a placeholder to keep these two checklists in sync. on the redesign side. Then you can run your monthly balance report. So in Classic, that is Baumon, and in Redesign, that is the SSDT monthly balance report from the report manager. Verify that everything looks good and keep a copy for your records, and then you are ready to work on the calendar year end steps. Okay, so in Classic, you're going to run the F1099 program, review that report, and resolve any errors. It does not create a separate error report. The errors are just embedded directly in that report, so please review that report closely. Resolve all of those errors. Make sure all of your vendors who need to be on that report are, and if you need more time reviewing this information, let us know. There have been a few districts in the past that, we've helped you close the calendar year and let you work on your 1099s in a change year database, and we can do that if needed. But go ahead and try to get as much cleaned up as possible right now. And the same in Redesign, you're going to go to the periodic menu and select the 1099 extract option and review that information, make sure it is complete. And if everything is ready, once you've reviewed your errors and corrected all of those, then you're going to go ahead and run the program to create your XML print file and to create your submission file. So the Redesign already has the calendar year-end release where you can see the new options for 1099 miscellaneous and 1099 NEC. But like Mary said, the Classic side, we have not received that release quite yet. So when that release comes out, we will let you guys know. And if we need to clarify any of these instructions on the Classic side, because of software changes, we will send that information out to you. But we definitely want to make sure we're not printing 1099s until you've heard from us that that Classic release is installed, which will hopefully be here in the next week or so, so that shouldn't be a worry. So if everything is correct and you've ran your 1099 programs for the final time and created your print files and your submission files, then please contact LACA and let us know that you have done that. And we will obtain print files from the Classic OpenVMS system and from the Redesign file archive. We will obtain your print file from there, and we will print your 1099 miscellaneous and 1099 NEC forms and let you know when those are ready to be picked up. And we will make sure they are ready to be picked up no later than January 25th so that you have that week to make sure you can get them sent out to your vendors. Because like Mary said, even though the 1099 miscellaneous isn't required to be submitted to the IRS until later, everything's supposed to be in the hands of the vendor by January 31st, whether on a 1099 miscellaneous or a 1099 NEC. So at this point, you will be contacting us to let us know that we can print your 1099s, and you will also be letting us know that you are ready for a backup, and we will copy your files, both Classic and Redesign files. The Classic files we will copy out into a change year Cal 20 database so you can use that for later reference as needed. And the Redesign, if you ask us for a backup, we will keep that here. There have been a few times, even though it's not necessarily a required step, because a lot of times you don't need to go back to a backup. You can just, change your current posting period and regenerate something. There have been a few times where it's been helpful that we have a backup saved out there that we can then restore into a test database and take a look at something for you. So if you want to go ahead and contact us for a backup, we will back up your files as well and retain that here in case it's ever needed. So the next step would just be to wait to hear from us. When we are done with those backups, we will let you know that you can move on. And at that point, you can run your workers' comp report. In Classic, that is work comp on the local menu, and in redesign, there is a proration utility available that some districts are using. So you are welcome to use the proration utility on the utilities menu if you need some sort of report for your workers' comp and how it's going to be charged out against the different accounts. Then we need to look at resetting the flag in Classic for your vendor new hire reporting. And before we do that, we want to run the vendor new hire report and see if there are any vendors sitting out there that still need to be reported. So in Classic and Redesign, we've listed the report here that we recommend you run to review and see if all of your vendors have been reported. We hope at this point in time in the year, this list is blank and your staff has reported any vendors that have appeared on it throughout the year to the state of Ohio. If you have vendors appearing on the report right now, please check with your staff to see if they still need to be reported or if possibly they reported them by another means instead of through the software. Another thing I guess I will say is if the report is blank at this point in time, it might not also hurt to say something to your staff just to make sure they're doing this process, because in order for a vendor to show up on this report, they have to be set up correctly. So if they're not setting them up correctly, then they're not showing up on the report. So it's just kind of once a year, check with your staff, make sure they're reporting vendors to the state of Ohio as required. If not, give us a call and we can kind of chat with you guys about that and make sure you have the instructions so that you're meeting your reporting requirements. If all of your vendors have been reported and your report is blank, then in Classic, the next step is to run VH Reset, which resets all of those vendors who have already been reported this year in 2020 back to be reportable for 2021, so that if you pay them $2,500 or more next calendar year, they will be reported next year. And there is no reset option in Redesign because the Redesign just basically looks at which calendar year the current period it is in, and it picks up that information accordingly. So we just have that space holder there just to give you the reminder of how that's going to work and that you're going to be re-reporting vendors every year if you pay them at least $2,500 a year. But there's no reset needed in Redesign. So now in Classic, you can run adjust to close the calendar year. And in Redesign, you can go to core posting periods and close December. So when you close December in Redesign, it's going to kick off all of those report bundles. So your monthly reports, if there's any calendar year reports, those are all going to get sent to your file archive. So give it a few minutes and then go look in your file archive, and the monthly report bundle should contain 27 template reports as of the last meeting we had with SSDT, unless they add any more reports soon. So just verify that those are out there. And after those have completed processing, then you can create your new posting period for January. If you haven't already done that, maybe you've already done that so that secretaries can enter January requisitions. But if you have not yet, you can go ahead and create that new posting period and make it current. And now you are in January. So your staff can start entering transactions for January in both systems. We do have some information here on the redesign checklist, just as a tip. Like going forward, if you're in January and you need to generate reports for a prior calendar year or a prior month, how best can you do that? Well, of course, you can go to the file archive and just look for the reports that are already there. That's probably going to be your quickest option. Other reports have an as of period on them that you can use. Those are on the account-based reports. So a lot of your summaries, appropriation summary, budget summary, cash summary, if they have an as of period, then it's going to pick up the year to date, fiscal year to date, month to date amounts based on the end of that period that you enter when you run the report. So that with an outstanding report, like outstanding purchase order, outstanding checks, you're actually going to have to temporarily change the current posting period if you want to go back and see an outstanding report from a prior period. And then you can switch the current period back. You don't have to open a prior period for that. You just have to change the current period. And if you decide you need to reopen a period for some reason, it wouldn't hurt for you to give us a call and chat with us about it, because when you reclose that period, you're going to generate your monthly CD bundle again. And so it's kind of a question of, do you want to do that or not? Do you want to have 2 sets of all reports stored? And maybe you do. Or if you want to, maybe right after you close, where you realize you forgot to post something and you want to kind of undo that. So you reopen December to make a change and you don't really want that first set of reports. You have to contact us first before you reclose December, and we can get rid of those reports. But after you reclose December, we can't pick and choose which reports we would be getting rid of. Or if you decide you just need to reopen it to maybe change the vendor on a purchase order, and it's not going to change any amount on your reports, so there's no reason to have 2 sets of reports, we could temporarily disable the report bundle for that second time that you close the period so that you don't have duplicate reports. So again, if you're reopening a period, maybe just give us a call to chat about that and we can help you decide which option is best. So those reminders are just there for you to start thinking about going forward as you're moving into the next calendar year or the next posting period on redesign, just because those concepts are kind of new to us. Classic didn't quite work that way. So also a good thing to do at this point in time is to run your ValAct report in Classic or your SSDT account validation report in redesign. Review any warnings on there, see if anything needs to be corrected, and make sure everything's in good shape at this point in time in the year. Then post any payroll batch files for January or future purchase order batch files for January. In Classic, you're going to use AutoPost to do that. And in redesign, you're going to use pending transactions to post those payroll files. You really don't have to do anything extra for future POs in redesign. It's just smart enough to know. Then we are on to step 25, where you can make sure those 1099 files are complete. So if you asked us for extra time earlier for any reason, and you're still working on those, this is just a placeholder to make sure that you wrap those up and make sure we get those printed files back to you so you can distribute them to your vendors by the January 31st deadline. And then at the end of January on Classic, if you use the monthend.com and the MoEnd procedure, this is just a reminder here to replace calendar year 2020 with 2021. And there's actually a document on the website that walks you through all of those steps. So maybe just print that and set that aside for the end of January. And there's really nothing that you have to worry about equivalent in the redesign, but we just have that reminder here again. If you have custom reports that you would like to start being created when you close a posting period in your own custom bundle, we could work with you to do that if interested, and it would just be an automated procedure after that. So, any questions? I think I talked very quickly and didn't really let anybody get a word in edgewise. So is there anything that you want me to go back and look at?
I'm not seeing any questions in chat.
Harry, this is Britt again.
Mm-hmm.
I just wonder if you could start from the beginning. I missed part of that.
I will send you a link to the recording after the meeting. Now, if anybody has any questions, sorry, I'm scrolling fast. If anybody has any questions that they go through this, Classic for the most part is going to be familiar with the exception of the new 1099 miscellaneous 1099 NEC change and redesign. If it's new, if you have questions, just feel free to call us. We will be happy to help. So I'm going to actually, I don't know, I guess I had tried this. Let's see, I'm going to change my share. So let's see, you're not going to see anything for a minute and I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, is everybody seeing the PowerPoint now?
Yes.
Okay, so again, here are the links to your checklists. Hopefully you like it simplified that we're only looking at a checklist this year and not also making you juggle a PowerPoint also, just because, we are human and those two things can get out of sync. So we just really want to make sure you have all of the complete information consolidated in one place. And then we just have a slide here with reminders. So we want to make sure you have your 1099 files done by January 15th so that we can get those turned around and printed for you no later than January 25th so that you can get them distributed to vendors by January 31st. And the 1099 NEC file submission is due by January 31st to the IRS, whereas the 1099 miscellaneous is not due until February 28th if on paper or March 31st if electronically. But for those classic districts, LACA plans to submit all of that together in January instead of putting anything off. And for those redesign districts, since SSDT made the program more complete this year and all of the header information and everything is going to be on your file right when it's generated out of the redesign, and we don't have to put it into the classic to get it formatted right, then we hope you guys, those are going to be an easy button to click to create that submission file. And if you've already created your account with the IRS, we will follow up and send you specific instructions of step-by-step how you're going to submit that. And instead of securely uploading that file to us, we hope that you can just submit that to the IRS directly. So as you are running these programs, at least in the redesign right now for the 1099s, you are going to have the option to run them for just 1099 miscellaneous or just 1099 NEC or both. So just keep that in mind that you all will most likely have both. So we want to make sure that you don't miss anybody, that you either always run it for both, or if you run it for one, then the other, just make sure you don't get sidetracked and forget to do the second one. So I didn't say that when we were in the checklist, but we will follow up with a few more instructions on how to submit for those redesign districts. And then we will be available to help you through that process, since this is going to be a first time doing that for everybody. So any questions? Or anything else, any other topics that you've thought of that you would like to ask each other, from district to district, any questions that you have? Okay, I'm not seeing anything in chat and I'm not hearing anything. So that is all we prepared for you today. If you have any other questions, you're welcome to stay on. If not, thank you very much for joining us. Have a nice afternoon and good luck with calendar year end.
Merry Christmas to everyone too.
Thank you.
Yes, Lottie, have a virtual cookie.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.